There's a word, it's based on a verse, a posuk. The posuk states, Hatznei aleches im Hashem Elokecho, that when you deal with God, it should be with great modesty, with a level of modesty. But it says im Hashem Elokecho, with God. So the way it's applied and it's interpreted, let's say somebody does an outstanding deed, good deed. Keep it under wraps. Be modest about it. When your posture, person can walk with a posture which displays arrogance. You should walk with not your nose up, your chin up. The posture should be more humble. That's because you're always with God. God is aware of every movement you make. So if you sense you're in the presence of God, what are you boasting? What are you boasting? Could you imagine a person goes and he works in a company, he's paid an outstanding amount of money for his service. And the employee says to the employer, you know what I did today? I put in a full 8 hours. That's what you tell the employer. The employer says, do you think I expected less? In terms of what I pay you, what I do for you? You're seeing it wrong. You have no entitlement because you're being paid plus over. So if you sense God's presence, you do everything with modesty. You behave. You don't act with levity. You don't behave irresponsibly. Positive or negative, everything's in check. Because if it's im Hashem Elokecha, it's with God, everything is with modesty. You know, there's an word in English, do things a modest amount, not too much, not too little, modest. It means something which is sufficient, not too much, not too little. That's modest. It's a modest amount. Our behavior has to be with modesty, as we'll see in a moment. If you sense, David Melch says, Shvisa Hashem legdi tomid. Factually speaking, God sees every nuance of our behavior, as in touch with every aspect of our mind, our emotion, our existence. A person is aware of that you were in the presence of Hashem, and he is aware of everything. Could you lie? God's aware you're lying. You're not supposed to lie. If I speak to you and you know I'm not telling you the truth, could I lie to you? How could I lie to you? It takes a level of being out of touch with reality, not recognizing that the person you're speaking to is aware that you're lying. So how do you have that level of lack of consciousness or conscience to be able to speak to a person lying in his face? It's not possible. If you recognize the person understands who you are, what you're saying, and you're not saying the truth, you can't say non-truth. So the more a person senses he's in God's presence, the more you behave modestly. You can't brag, that you did such a thing, or you did the wrong thing, or you dress. A person dresses out of the ordinary for the sake of notice. What do you want to be noticed for? Well, you realize who I am. People should know. When I walk into the room, I want everybody to know I'm here. Well, years ago, people used to wear cologne. People don't wear cologne today any longer. First of all, cologne, there were people a block away, you're able to smell them coming down the street. All the cats were meowing already, okay? And the dogs were barking at midnight already because they knew this guy's coming out at 6 a.m. What is it all about? Who do you think you are? I always tell over the story. There was a person, Yad Avram, many years ago. Her aunt passed away. And she asked me if I would officiate at the funeral. And the rabbi who was going to be there, or the reverend, he was a Reform person, Reform spiritual leader. Spiritual leader, spirits. They used to call whiskey spirits. He was a spiritual leader. And we come to this funeral home in Bloomfield, New Jersey. That's where the funeral was. I come there. and everybody's sitting with their heads bared. No. So I said to my student, who was a niece of this woman who passed away, I would only do it on one condition: if the service is Orthodox. If it's not Orthodox tradition, I can't come. So she said, what does that mean? It means that when the children have to do kriya, rend the garments, a black ribbon is not enough. And whatever, I come, everything's okay. That's also another condition. When they put the coffin in the ground, only Jews could do it, not non-Jews. And the ones who cover the grave are only Jews. And that is the halacha. A Jew being buried by non-Jews is a disgrace. It's like you say to a person, I will bury you. If it's within the context of ritual burial, that's an honor. Otherwise, it's I will bury you. That means I'll put you out of existence. So for a non-Jew to bury a Jew, it's a disgrace. It's desecrating the person. The agreed comes right after they lower the casket into the ground. All the grandchildren and all the friends start putting earth in the grave, filling up the grave. An old man comes over to me. This man must have been already in his mid-80s. It looked like he went to some kind of hairdresser on Madison Avenue. He had this big, white, fluffy hair, a lot of more hairspray, otherwise it wouldn't have held up the hair. And he was wearing patent leather shoes, a green sport jacket, a silk scarf in his lapel, in his pocket, and he was wearing a pinky ring, a little diamond pinky ring on his pinky. And he says to me, Rabbi, Jews don't behave this way. Who ever heard of children and burying their mother? Who ever heard of such a thing? We don't do it that way. It's not our custom. I said, mister, I want to explain you something. That's our custom. Your way is not our custom. So I was like taken aback. The man's already 85. The man nearly has 2 feet in the grave. And he's wearing his pinky ring with his new sport jacket. Years ago, people, when they reached a certain age, they never bought new clothing because it was just a waste of money, because they knew in a few years or a day or two or a week, it's either going to Goodwill Industries or who knows where it's going. It's going to be passed down to the great-grandchild. So what are you buying new clothing? This man believed he's living forever. Therefore, he could say, it's not our custom. He knows he's a Jew. This man, no question was raised on a traditional level. This is not our way. Who do you think you are? What do you think you're walking around at the age of 85 without a cane? Do you think it's just the genes? Maybe God has something to say about this. You should be you should deal with God on a modest level. So that's what the Rambam now speaks about. Modesty. Tell you, guy like Ron, I haven't seen him in a while. He didn't make a whole Taram when he came in. Rabbi, I'm here. I see you here, keeps quiet. That's modesty. Doesn't wear as a tuxedo when he gets on. It's modesty. Could have pulled it out of the closet. It's modesty. Okay. Tznius Gedolo Noagim Talmidei Chacham Atzmon. We're on number 6. Talmidei Chachamim, Torah scholars, they conduct themselves with great levels of modesty. It's interesting. Great Talmidei Chachamim. One has an obligation to acknowledge them and to honor them. If you ever see this kind of person walking to a bakery and there's a line there, he'll wait online the way everybody else waits online. And the people very often say, Rabbi, it's unacceptable. You have to go to the front of the line. But the rabbi himself, he stays at the end of the line in his place, literally anonymously. He wants no acknowledgement for who he is. And you see this refined behavior. He's not coming to make any claims because of who he is, although he's more than all of them combined. That's Talmidei Chachamim. They behave with great levels of modesty. What is that? Lo yizbazu v'lo yizgulu roshan v'lo gufan. They will not allow themselves to be disgraced by uncovering their heads. their bodies. Even when he's doing his personal needs, his bodily functions, he doesn't expose himself. There's no such thing as Talmud Chacham. He lets his hair down, as they say it. He just drops his pants and he does his thing. You know, it's interesting. The Chovos HaLevavos, duties of the heart, writes, you know, time is precious. Time is life. And yet, we as human beings, God created us with bodily functions. Bodily function takes time. But every day, minimally once a day, one has to relieve himself. Multiple times a day, one has to urinate. Why? God could have created man once a year, once a month. You know, how often do you change the bag in the vacuum cleaner? Right when it gets filled, it's enough. They have vacuums, you never have to take out the bag. Somehow, what happens to the dust and all whatever is sucked up, that's a patent. They never revealed the patent. Okay. So why did God create the human being with the need to defecate and to urinate? So Chovos HaLevavos writes, man has an ego, and that ego has to be tempered. And the person has to realize you have animal functions. As the animal relieves itself, you have to relieve yourself. As the animal passes water, you have to pass water. That's what it is. Don't think your so-called man's gift to humanity. When you went to the zoo and you saw the monkey over there, openly, publicly, doing whatever it is, you do the same thing. You have a lot in common with the monkey. The only difference is you have a spiritual component which puts another level of obligation on you. That's the way you have to see it. But that's why. But man naturally gravitates towards arrogance, ego. It's the way I see it, the way I want it. So therefore, the great Talmidei Chachamim, the great Torah sages, they conduct themselves with great levels of modesty. That even when they did their bodily functions, they did not expose themselves only at the moment that they had to be able to do that function. There wasn't this macho. You know, people are macho. You ever see, today it's a whole different reality. One time, you used to have people, very few people tattooed themselves. But once in a while, you saw somebody had a tattooed their arms. And they were very muscular. And they rolled their sleeves up, not to the elbow, so they could display their physique. Understand? What's it all about? He wants to tell everybody he has what nobody else has. Okay? But he doesn't realize when time's up, he goes in the grave like everybody else goes into that grave. And he will decompose and be food for the maggots and the worms like everyone else. If he'd realized that, he maybe would see life through a different lens. But the Talmidei Chachamim, the great Torah sages, who have that clarity of lens in the lifetime, they see it correctly. Therefore, they're not even though they're more than everyone, but they don't feel, therefore, they're entitled or have this macho edge to them that they could lord over other people. No, they have humility. That's the modesty. It's rooted because they recognize that they're only here, they're pawns on a board, and they're here for a purpose, and they're bound to God's will. That's it. They will not clean themselves with their right hand. Now, we mentioned when you put on your tefillin, if you're righty, you wear your tefillin on your left hand. So what is the function of the right hand? Okay, you speak to another person. You know, I was in the little leagues. I batted with my right hand. I used to throw the ball. I was a pitcher. I pitched with my right hand. That's my right hand. So if I could throw the ball, and when I defend myself, it's a 1-2 knockout punch, my right hand straight to the jaw. It's a right hand. So why can't he clean himself? after he does bodily functions. You know why? Because throwing the ball and knocking out the person with your right hand with the one punch and swinging the bat or anything, that's not what the right hand's all about. The right hand is to put on the tefillin, which are meant to be put on your left hand. That is the primary function of that right hand. Primary. When you take the lulav, the four species, the species which has the most species associated with it is held in the right hand. That's lulav. Because the lulav, you have the palm branch, you have the myrtle, and you have the willow in that hand. The right hand takes precedence over the leg. Therefore, you hold it with your right hand. And the esrog is held with the left hand for that reason. So what is the function of the right hand? To do a mitzvah. And because the right hand, you put on tefillin, which is the sign that you want identify with God, it's not appropriate to use the right hand for that function of cleansing yourself. So therefore, you should use the left hand. We'll see in a moment. That's the understanding. And when you do your bodily functions, you should remove yourself from other people. That's part of modesty. The ikona is cheder lifnim cheder, moro lifnim in moro v'nifne. The more private it is, the better off it is. Meaning, you're almost like embarrassed that other people should be aware that you're doing your bodily functions. Because again, what does it display? It displays how earthy a human being is, that there's very little difference between yourself and the animal. And if a person has no choice, but he has to do his bodily functions behind a fence, it's out in the field, does he do it in the middle of the field, or he goes to a private place to do it there? Nobody's there. He should go to a point that when he relieves himself and he passes wind, no one else should hear it. That's part of the modesty. And if he does his bodily function in an open field, he should be far away, and the other people within his proximity, men, they should not see his penis or his nakedness. It should be at a distance. Although you see a person unclothed, you shouldn't be able to see it clearly. When a person is doing his bodily functions, he should not speak. This is based on a Kabbalistic. Speech is what is a spiritual endowment. You should not speak when you're doing your bodily functions. As one has to behave and act with modesty when you do the bodily functions during the daytime where other people could see, identically you should conduct yourself even at nighttime. Why? Because you're still in the presence of God. Has nothing to do with people, only people sing. A person should always talk health-wise. You should do your bodily functions in the morning and the evening. Why? Because otherwise you have to go far out. Early in the morning, nobody's too many, so you don't have to go too far out. And at night, also, you don't have to go too far out. But during daytime, when people are around, and you have to be modest, you have to go far away from the community. So just good advice, when you do your bodily functions, in the morning and the evening, do it early and do it at night, so you shouldn't have to go far out. The Gemara in Brochos cites a verse from Mishlei, and it says that before one eats, it's based on certain references in the Gemara, as we had earlier, that before you eat, you shouldn't feel that you're withholding yourself health-wise. Person should relieve himself. It's like you have an oven, and in the oven you have spent ash. You should first clean out the ash, and then you put in new fuel. As a result of that, the heat absorbs in the walls and doesn't absorb it in the ash, because the ash otherwise absorbs part of heat, and therefore what you bake there or cook will not cook properly, will bake properly. Identically, the body to function as it shouldn't be preoccupied dealing with the waste that's in the body should first relieve itself of all the waste, and then afterward, the system is involved, engaging in processing, digesting the food. That's the Gemara. Therefore, it says you should have a location to your bodily functions not too far from your table. Person has a private outhouse out back. You don't have to go too far. Life is less complicated. But if you have to go far away, it makes it much more complicated. Either you have a choice. Either you eat while you're withholding yourself, which is a health issue, or you have to take out time and it becomes complicated. Because whenever you eat, it's complicated. You have to go far away to take care of your personal needs. Then you come back to eat. So who's the one who's fortunate? The one who could have the location next to his table. So you see, we don't realize it. That we have indoor plumbing in our society, the level of distraction and burden at which you have to be occupied with. Either you live like an animal, that you have waste in the streets. You go to. I was never in India or in Bangkok, but supposedly you walk the streets there. I know people in the colored stone business. You have to walk with a perfumed handkerchief over your mouth and nose. The stench in the streets are so terrible, you can barely contain yourself that you shouldn't vomit. That's how bad it is. Because these people, that's the way they live. The waste is in the streets. But you're a human being. Don't you realize? Just hygienically, health-wise, it's not the way you do it. It should be buried. It should be washed away. These people are totally live like uncivilized people. For whatever reason, the culture allows it. But we're going back to King Solomon, the wise men ever lived. The way Jews always lived, even if you have to inconvenience yourself to do your bodily function, you go something, do it modestly, away from your table. So therefore, to appreciate what it is, and the laws which pertain to living as a Jew, you're not permitted to study Torah, you're not permitted to say a bracha, a blessing, if you're within the proximity of human waste. It's a separate room, it's flushed away, there's no smell, this, that, whatever it is. It's an unbelievable chesed elyon. It's a divine kindness that God does for us, that we live the way we live. Just hygienically. At one time to have hot water and soap to wash our hands. So before we eat, our hands are cleansed. We don't have that bacteria on it. We don't appreciate what God provides for us in our modern society. We read a little bit about Alan, read about this before he went to medical school. That's the reason why he was very motivated. Louis Pasteur, right? During the Civil War, a lot of the troops, they wounded and they did surgery. Soon afterwards, they died. They didn't realize the level of that there should not be bacteria. It should be sterile. They didn't realize that. And once that because the people, they died soon afterwards. Because they developed an infection, they died. The whole idea of understanding that there's such a thing as bacteria, that there's such a thing as this, and as a result of that, we do our best to protect the environment, the patient, whatever it is, not to be believed. Or one time we didn't have antibiotics. Person contracted some kind of whatever it is, he would die. One time people died of pneumonia. How do you deal with it? You prayed and you hope for the best. Otherwise, the person died. These are all conveniences or gifts. They're gifts, literally gifts. Now, we speak about refined behavior. The Talmud tells us that when a Jew speaks, he should speak b'loshen nekiyah. You should speak in a more refined way rather than earthy. Earthy, give you an example. The Torah goes out of its way. Every word in the Torah is accounted for. And if the Torah could speak in a more abbreviated way, it doesn't speak in a more lengthy way. Now, a non-kosher species is referred to in the Torah as behema tameo. Tameo means spiritually, it's unclean. So the word tameo means not kosher. When the species went into the ark, and Noah was told to take 7 of the kosher species into the ark, and 2 of the non-kosher species, just a male and a female. When it speaks about non-kosher species, it doesn't say tameo. Take 2 of the contaminated species. It says eineno tahura. That is not pure. When you say impure, it displays a certain representation of negative. Impure, you visualize impure. When you speak about it's not pure, it doesn't have that same connotation of visualizing what's impure. It's not pure. So you understand it, it's not. So therefore, if you say something more refined in a more fine manner, and in a more earthy manner, you should be sensitive to that. That's the way a Jew should speak. So it was known in Chazon Ish, when you say something is a lie. In Hebrew, the word lie is sheker. Sheker is a lie. So when he heard something which was not true, he would not say it's a lie. He says it's a non-truth. Rather than say the word lie, I'll give you an example. You say to a person, "You're a liar." It's a pretty direct categorization of that person in negative. If you say you're a person who doesn't tell the truth, it's received differently. One is more offensive. You're a liar is very offensive. You don't tell the truth, okay? It's coated with sugar, so to say. That's called in a more refined way to say it. Because you don't want to be a person who expresses something with such a level of extreme negativity. That's being more refined. So how do Talmidei Chacham speak? The people, they come in, they start screaming. They're like boisterous. Being boisterous is lack of refinement. The Talmidei Chacham speaks, doesn't scream. He speaks at a normal level, sometimes even a whisper, because that's a display of his humility. He's not coming to make demands. What's going on over here? I've been waiting for 20 minutes. What's going on? You go over to the person and say, is there a problem? Is there a delay? In a more refined manner. That's the way a person's Talmidei Chacham speaks. And you feel it's too late or too long, walk out of the store or choose another venue. Excuse me. Talmidei Chacham lo yitzoek v'tzoveach b'shas diburo kibei misachayos. A Talmidei Chacham should not scream, or tzovech means also like belt it out through his speech like an animal, like a domesticated, undomesticated animal. It's with a refinement. A person comes to a hotel, sometimes to get the attention of the person you want to check in, there's a bell. So you just hit the bell. You hit it once. Person starts slamming the bell. Slow. Calm down. I'm waiting. Do you know who I am? It's all display of what? A lack of humility. Person's humble, hits it once, waits a moment, hits it again. But again, that's the way a Talmidei Chacham behaves. Because the Talmidei Chacham recognizes, understanding who he's supposed to be and who he is, he acts with humility. With humility, you don't scream, you don't belt it out. You're on an even keel. He's not only, don't you scream, don't speak louder than a person normally speaks. Yeah. Nachas, dibura b'nachas, all people you speak at the same level, with that same gentleness. That's for some reason, I'm not sure why. When I used to park in the garage in Manhattan, and the garage attendant, they had, most of them were Hispanics. And whenever I would, Hispanics or blacks, they would say, okay, boss. That's the way I didn't display any level that I'm trying to dominate them. Or I give them a tip. Thank you, boss. Why? I don't know. But that's the way they always refer. Okay, boss. Why am I a boss? I don't wear boss clothing. I don't wear things made in Germany. That's why I don't in any way encourage to buy that kind of garment. You can speak to Alan. Only made in Japan, not from Germany. Alan, am I correct? Okay.
Correct.
Okay. But when you speak,
Although I don't know the Japanese either.
You shouldn't scream, but not only scream, don't speak louder than a normal person speaks. Because louder means you're saying who you are. It's a lack of refinement. Shidabim nachs yoser. Achi srachek. Achi yire kedivrei. Gasya ruach. Because when you speak gently, nachas shal yisrachek. Achi yire kedivrei. Otherwise, you look like a boisterous, self-centered person. The rabbi's in it for himself. He's trying to control people. You don't want that ever even to enter a person's mind due to the way you express yourself or the way you behave. Umagdim shalom l'chol adam. When you greet a person, you should be the first one to greet. Why? So that person should see you in a positive light. Because since you have a positive representation, it's important you should be a role model. You're only a role model if people look at you in a positive vein. They don't see you positively, there's no takeaway. Person acts queer. I used to use that word. They didn't use the word queer, and I don't know what word they use today. He's queer. You act fully normal, nice, gentle, warm, giving,
Rabbi,
quality.
we say socially awkward.
Okay. So what do we call society that's socially awkward? They're not. The one who behaves differently, he's awkward. Okay. But what is the high here? Why? You behave in this manner that there's a positive feeling towards this person. It's very important. How many in life, there's book knowledge and there's role models. When a person has a mentor, what's a mentor? A mentor is not only what he teaches you, he teaches you the approach. The whole persona makes the impression of that person, of the mentor. So if you represent everything positive and attractive in a quality sense, people gravitate to that. There's a famous story that in Warsaw, many of the people became Nazis, the non-Jews. And there was a certain rabbi that when this boy was a teenager, whenever he'd go out early to shul, he'd see this teenager and he would initiate, he'd say good morning in Polish to him. When the Nazis took over and they started round up the Jews, he went and protected this rabbi. Why? Because he acknowledged him in the morning by initiating saying good morning. For that value that he saw him as a special person, he says, this one, he's under my care. Just leave him. You never know, besides the Kiddush Hashem. It's Kiddush Hashem. A person who represents something and you act and behave refined, in a refined manner, and people see you in a positive vein, you sanctify God's name, because who do you represent? The dawn is called Odom Kavskus. You give people, if you could give a person benefit of doubt, you give a person benefit of doubt. Don't be negative. right away you're critical. If you give him benefit of doubt, I'll give you an example. You have a person who's a not observant Jew, and unfortunately, many of them, it's not their fault. They were raised without a Jewish education. The parents didn't provide. Even the parents, today's day and age, didn't know any better. As a result of that, they're not observant. So could you be critical of them? Unless a person flaunts who he is and he creates damage, that's a different story. Due to his position, he's out to uproot Judaism and destroy it. That's referred to, that's a mechemes Hashem. Then you're taking up God's battle. But if a person only behaves that way because he doesn't know any better, you try to teach him, you try to do something positive, that he should see you in that light, that maybe he'll be receptive when you say something to him, to teach him something, or even say a good word to him. You should always speak about the praiseworthiness of your fellow, never negative. Never denigrate him. You know, people are negative. The moment you start being negative on people, people don't want to hear about it. You're a negative person. But a person is always positive. He always speaks fine, tries to find the silver lining in every black cloud. Always something. It's positive, that person becomes attractive to other people. Once you're attractive, you're seeing, that's called a Kiddush Hashem. That's you sanctifying God's name. You're a positive representative. Umagdim shalom l'chol odom, excuse me. Ohev shalom v'rodiv shalom. Aaron, the brother of Moshe, he's depicted in Pirkei Avos, Ohev shalom v'rodiv shalom. He loved peace and he pursued peace. You know, many people say they love peace. But peace is always what they believe peace is to be. But if you pursue peace, you don't leave a stone unturned to bring about harmony and peace among others, that means you truly love it. Because even willing to put yourself on the line to what? To bring about peace. The Gemara tells a story. A man says to his wife, you know, the high priest was the second highest position in the Jewish people. They had the king, and the next echelon was the high priest. And this husband gets upset with his wife, and he says, and he wants a reason to divorce her. And he says to his wife, if you don't go spit the high priest in the eye, you're ripe for a divorce. I'll divorce you. That's what he tells his wife. Aaron HaKohen, Aaron, who's the holy high priest, Moshe's brother, gets wind of it, and he goes over to the woman, and he says, you know, I have an eye ailment. And the doctor says, I have to have fresh saliva right out of a person's mouth. Could you please spit me in the eye? And she spits him in the eye. He saved that woman's marriage. And the husband understood the only reason why the high priest did it was to save his marriage. When a person understands that, how does he feel? He opens his eyes, he understands who he is. That his behavior and his demands are totally unacceptable. That's Ohev Shalom, not you love peace. You put yourself, you sacrifice for the sake of peace. The person, the Talmud tells us, as there's a mitzvah to say something which is beneficial, there's a mitzvah to remain silent when it's not beneficial. There was somebody who was associated out of Rome. He's a pure guy, he's about tshuva, and he sees things in his community which irk him. And he says to me, should he say something? I said, you want to know something? If you're only saying something for the sake of kiruv, to bring Jews closer to Judaism, you want to be smart, keep quiet. Because you can be driving them away from Judaism if you get involved. If you have a refined manner and you're knowledgeable and they'll appreciate what you said, okay, so then you should say something. But if it's going to have the contrary effect, you're going to drive people from Judaism. If you want to be ahead of the game, just keep quiet. So just as there's a mitzvah to say what should be said, there's a mitzvah not to say something that should not be said. You know, they have people There's the constructive criticism. After they finish doing the constructive criticism, there's nothing left of the person they criticized. But they mean constructive. There was a certain teacher in a yeshiva, and he says to students, I could take every student apart. That's how well I understand the student. So the 15-year-old boy says to the teacher, you may not know how to take us apart. The question is, could you put us back together again? That's a separate discussion. You understand? Not so simple. You have to understand, you're wise, you see the end result of what you're doing. I mean this. The question is, what's going to be the end of the game? Is the person going to be offended? Is the person going to be so hurt that he's going to flee from anything that represents what you're all about? If that's the case, keep quiet. Ketzad. Lo yiratze chaver b'sheskaso. Let's say your friend has a claim against you, and he's angry, and you want to go and present your case and reason with him to get back in his good graces, but he's angry. You understand? If he's angry, it's not the time, because there's no way, he doesn't have the capacity to be able to consider whatever you say. He may hear the words. It may incite him to even to a greater degree. Therefore, wait, let the anger pass. That he'll be in a rational state. When he's in a rational state, you can present your position rationally. But if he's irrational, you can't speak to an irrational person. As convincing as your argument may be, could you convince a person who's deaf? The man can't hear you. So if he can't hear you, you're going to convince him. What are you wasting? He's wasting your time. But a person's angry, it's worse than wasting your time. You actually may incite him. Because since he's in an irrational state, he's upset with you, it's not the time to try to appease him and make up. If a person makes a vow, we do this before Shoshana, it's called nullification of vows. You go to the rabbi, and the rabbi says to you, if you would have known this and this, would have you made the vow? And the rabbi knows exactly how to evaluate the situation, and he probably will say no. He says, if that's the case, the vow is annulled. What about the man just made the vow? Let's see, a person, he said to his friend, you will never ever step into my home. My home is off limits to you. So the fellow Jew cannot step into his home because he made a vow that the premise is off limits to him. Because he had, and why does this person make such an extreme vow? Evidently, because he offended him and he cannot tolerate the other person's existence. He doesn't want him crossing his threshold. And soon afterwards, he goes to the rabbi. He says, I'd like to nullify my vow. I came over, told my wife, she says you should go nullify it. But he's still seething because of why he made the vow. Whatever the rabbi says to him, if it would have been this, would he have made the vow? He says, I would have made it either case. So a person should not nullify a vow until he calms down. Once you calm down, you become more rational, and then you realize maybe you were too hot under the collar when you made the vow. Now you're open to the various reasons why the vow should be nullified. Okay? Could you imagine? Person, a loved one passes away. They haven't even buried the person yet. And he's already trying to console the person. This is like a person just finished surgery. The anesthesia is wearing off, and the person hasn't been given his pain medication yet. He's literally writhing in pain. And you say to the person, it'll pass soon, it'll pass soon. Right now, the man cannot get me some pain medication. What do you tell me it's going to pass soon? It's not a consolation. To try to console the person who he's consumed with his grief, he's grieving. The man hasn't yet been put in the grave yet. What are they trying to console him? He's overwhelmed with his tragedy. Well, I'm going out of town. I have to pay a shiva visit. I'll do it before I get on the plane. It falls on deaf ears. The man doesn't even relate to what you're saying. He doesn't have the capacity to be consoled. Let's say you see a person trips and falls, and you don't have to pick him up. And it's almost embarrassing that he fell. Try to turn your head, turn away. Because you don't want him to feel embarrassed that you noticed maybe how clumsy he was that he fell. I remember years ago, God forbid a person is an epileptic, and the person has an epileptic fit. They tell people, go away. Because when the person comes back to himself, and he sees himself, and he's not in good shape. Very often he vomits, and he's actually bruised. People are watching him. Comes out of there, he's embarrassed. Walk away. A person should not be seen in a compromised state. The same thing. A person somehow is experiencing something negative. He took a financial loss. He's being reprimanded. And it's something not pleasant. You shouldn't be there listening. Shouldn't be listening. Walk away. Story in the book of Moshe Feinstein. He himself was a giant in every sense of the word. He had a neighbor, a woman, and his wife lit Shabbos candles, Rabbi Feinstein's, and his neighbor was after candle lighting time. And she came to his home to ask something. And she rang the bell a few times, the doorbell. But you're not permitted to ring the doorbell on Shabbos. So when she came in to the house to ask him about something, Moshe Feinstein did not look at her face. And said to her, you realize, in a very gentle way, the Shabbos has begun. You're not permitted to ring the doorbell. She says, I didn't know. But he did not look at her. Why did he not look at her? And she made it a point that she realized he was not looking at her. Because when he meets her on the street, she shouldn't feel embarrassed that he knew that she rang the bell. As a result of that, when he meets her on the street, he won't even know who rang the bell. Because he doesn't want her to feel embarrassed. You understand this? This level of consideration. That's greatness. To take the other person into account, that when they meet you on the street, you should know that they are the person. So when you see a person messing up, being hurt, or whatever it is, turn away. It's as if nobody knows, or he doesn't know. Lo yishana b'diburo. You shouldn't back down. You shouldn't alter your words. You say something, stick to your words. V'lo Yosef, lo yigra el divrei shalom uchyotze ben. Person, there's an expression, person's words at word. And all of a sudden, the person changes the terms. You said you're going to do something, and then you say, well, I couldn't do it. It's not the right thing. Because it's disappointing for the other person. If the person was counting, you should do something, you should carry through. This is all considered refined behavior. I used to say a certain person that whatever you would say, divide it in half and turn it backwards. Then maybe you'd have a semblance of truth. The person was the pathological liar. But people, they say things, but they don't mean what they say. Although the other person was counting on it. You say something, stick to your word. Unless it's divrei shalom. For the sake of peace, you're doing certain things that you're permitted. Thomas, you're even permitted to alter your speech for the sake of peace, for shalom. We find that when the angels came to Avram Avinu, and Sarah overheard that she was going to have a child, what did she say? My master is so old. Could he father a child at this old age? He was 99 years old. But when God shared it with Sarah, shared it with Avram, that to criticize Sarah, she says, she is old. How could she not believe me that she's gonna have a child by saying she is old? Hashem didn't say what, tell Avram what she actually said. She actually said, my master is old. So for the sake of peace, you alter the truth. Let's go Shalom Bayis. Give you an example. You have a fellow employee and the boss is upset. And the one who actually caused the boss to be upset is there an employee, and he wants to know who did it. And it's not because the person is incompetent or the person did something deliberate. But if the boss knows who it is in his moment, he's going to fire him. What you say? What should you say? And you know who it is. The right thing said, I don't know who it is. But you're lying. But you're lying for the sake of peace. If the man truly did something dishonest, that's a different story. Then you're not supposed to withhold the truth. Of course, it's a detriment to the employer. But if it's only in his moment of heat, he's going to do something irrational to fire the person. If he fires him, he's not going to rehire him. What do you do? Do you know? Sorry, I don't know. But you lied. You're supposed to tell the truth. In this context, you're permitted. That's not called lying. Because if it's permitted, if it's justified not to say the truth, that's not called a lie.